Hey guys, OJ Albina here, bringing you guys another video here. Today we are going to be ranking each and every Paldea Dex Pokemon, at least fully evolved Pokemon, or even Pokemon that I just think has viability of the Dex. Everything new introduced from a Draft League perspective. Now I know over the last couple weeks we haven't been doing as much Draft League content, but that is my bread and butter here on the channel, which is essentially a counter team format where you pick a team at the beginning of a season with a set point or allocation. You battle against other people knowing their teams, building for their teams, and you battle it out to see if you can become the champion at the end of the season. It is my personal favorite way to play competitive Pokemon, and with the new generation comes new Scarlet and Violet draft leagues, and they're finally starting to kick off. We're finally seeing games played, tier lists made, drafts happening. I've been playing in leagues and drafted some teams and things like that already for Paldea, so I'm pretty excited. I think I have a pretty good idea how most of these Pokemon will work in the format, and I wanted to give you guys my thoughts and honest opinions on each and every one of them here today. If you guys do enjoy today's tier list video, be sure to drop a like on the video as well as subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 2,000 subs, and if you can help me get there by the end of the year, that would be absolutely incredible. I would really appreciate it. We got a whole month, and it also lets me know you're enjoying the content if you're dropping a sub and liking and all that stuff. So yeah, with that being said, be sure to comment down below. Question of the day is going to be, what Pokemon are you most excited to use out of the Pokemon we're going to talk about today? And yeah, that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, like I said, I'm only going to be going over Pokemon that are like draft league viable, so I'm not going to be like doing Sprigatito or Tarantula or anything like that, but I'll be ranking any NFEs that I think have some kind of viability. Spoilers, there's not really that many in this dex though, at least in my opinion. So yeah, with that being said, we'll start off with not Sprigatito, but Meowscarada, which you are going to go ahead and put up here in A tier. Now, I might be underrating Meowscarada just a little bit. It is a Pokemon with Protean, and I think if this was last gen, I would have this thing a little bit higher, but there was a Protean nerf this generation that the Pokemon's type change isn't going to be every time it clicks a move now. It's now just the first time it comes in to click a button. So it is a bit of a hindrance on Meowscarada in this generation, in my opinion. Now, if it could switch between a dark type into a bug type into a electric type when it clicks Thunder Punch, I think it would be an S tier Pokemon and debatably banned, just like all the other Protean starters in the past. But now I think there's a little bit more leeway in that. However, it is still an amazing Pokemon, base 123 speed, 110 attack, stab knockoff, which is incredibly valuable in this Paldea Dex meta where not a lot of things get knockoff anymore. A lot of Pokemon lost it, so Meowscarada having access to that is going to be pretty incredible for it. As a tool, it can U-turn, it can spikes up, it can T-spike up, which is pretty crazy. Not really a move I think it would get. It's got great coverage overall, which is really important as a Pokemon like this. So, yeah, it's an overall very solid Pokemon. I definitely like Meowscarada. Next up here, we have Skeledirge, which is going to be a Fire and Ghost type with the Unaware ability, our Fire starter of the region. I'm going to go ahead and put him in B tier. Now, this Pokemon is actually a lot better than I initially thought it was going to be. It's my personal favorite when it comes to design and things like that. It was my playthrough guy. Absolutely love Skeledirge here. Oh, and keep in mind, I'm going to be ranking these guys based on their value that I think they offer. Now, let's say I don't think Meowscarada is very good, even though it's typically going to be a higher point Pokemon, like a tier 1 Pokemon or like a 17-point Pokemon, something like that. If I think Skeledirge is better, I'm going to rank it higher despite one of them being more like, valuable on a point scale. It's going to be the value I think they offer your team. So keep that in mind as we go throughout here, right? Now, as for Skeledirge, Unaware is a pretty incredible ability on this Pokemon. Keep in mind, it also does have access to Slack Off as an egg move, so Unaware plus Slack Off and Heavy Duty Boots to avoid Hazard Chip is going to be really annoying on a Pokemon with bulk that it has. 104 base HP, 100 defense, and 75 SPDF is pretty darn incredible. While also ignoring any kind of stat buffs or anything like that. It's really, really nice in all honesty. It has a great signature move in Torch Song that guaranteed boosts its special attack by a stage every single time it clicks it, which is, again, absolutely incredible. Think Fiery Dance on Volcarona, but always, which is really, really awesome. I think it's a great, like, with like Will-O-Wisp and Hex. I think typically you're going to see, like, Slack Off, Torch Song, Will-O-Wisp, Hex sets and things like that. But even then, I also think, like, Specs variants could be great. It can overheat, it can earth power, things like that. So that could be definitely really cool. And this thing lives some absurd hits with its bulk, man. I really think this thing has some great defensive utility, despite being a fire type, which typically isn't the best defensively. Skeledirge here is definitely going to see some success in that role. So big fan of the Pokemon here, and I think it's definitely deserving of the B tier right now. Now, next up we have Quaquaval, and this is another Pokemon I was a little bit iffy on. I wasn't too big on it initially looking at its stat spread, but man, this thing is a threat. I watched I can't even say who because I don't want to spoil any like upcoming Wi-Fi games. I watched a Wi-Fi game for a Wi-Fi league that I'm going to be in early because they streamed it to me in call. And I saw someone get smashed by a Quackleval recently earlier today. With the Moxie ability, this thing, and again, excuse me if I'm coughing, I'm still, again, getting over this sickness. I think that this thing is definitely an A tier Pokemon. And I might even argue above Meowscarada, while Meowscarada is better. I think that the point value that you're going to typically find Quackleval at is a little bit more valuable, in my opinion, where you're typically going to find this thing at like 12, 13 points, probably, opposed to like a top-end Pokemon like Meowscarada. I would personally take Quackleval. This Pokemon is pretty incredible, with water fighting as its stab options, which is great. It has a great precedent set by Pokemon like Paldea and Urshifu Rapid Strike. It's another Pokemon just like that, and it can pivot just like both of those. It does have access to U-turn. Aqua Step is its signature move, being 80 base power, but a guaranteed speed boost is incredible on a Pokemon with 85 base speed, which is pretty darn lacking. One of the things I was kind of most concerned about Quackleval here. So being able to boost that speed, as well as potentially boost your attack anytime you get a KO. Close combat, Aqua Step, it has access to Ice Spinner, which is a great Ice Stab, as well as Brave Bird to really nuke through fat grasses. It has Wave Crash, which is essentially water type double edge. It can U-turn, it can Rapid Spin, it can taunt, it can Swords Dance, it can bulk up. It can do a ton of different things and offer a ton to your squad. I think it's going to be typically seen like SD sweeping rolls with like SD plus Aqua Step, but I think Scarf variants with U-turn are great. I think Choice Band variants are incredible, and this thing could be a really potent wall breaker and things like that. So really great Pokemon overall. Okay, now we can kind of get into the shitters a little bit. We have Oinkologne, which I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. We're going to go ahead and put Oinkologne here in D tier, or in F tier. There's not much that this Pokemon really offers a squad. I suppose it does function as a bulky normal. It's decently fat with like 110 HP. It's like 110, 75, 80 bulk, which is okay. But it doesn't have any form of like recovery or anything like that. No wish, no obviously like slack off or anything like that, which would be pretty cool. I think that would actually make this thing a lot more viable. But I think its lack of like stayability is pretty tough. It really can only rest up. It does have a slight niche, I think, in a Paldea Dex format, because there's not a lot of good normal. I'm gonna put both these guys down here. Not a lot of good normal types and not a lot of good ghost immunity, so that could be inherently valuable. It has solid physical coverage, but really that's it. It's not overtly strong too. 100 base attack isn't terrible, but it's not great. And it doesn't have great utility moves and things like that to really justify drafting it, in my opinion. So I'm not really big on Oinkologne here, if I'm saying its dumb name right. And I think it's a very lame design. And a really big disappointment from our boy, what do you call it? Lechonk here. Now, I do have a good normal type for you guys next. Now, I know everybody doesn't like his design, but I'm telling you, I think this Pokemon is going to be slept on demon draft league wise. I absolutely love this guy, and that is going to be the Dunsparce. And I'm making a hot take prediction. This is going to be one of the best bulky normals in the format for early Paldea decks right now. Spoilers, I have drafted this thing already. I've used it on a ton of speed tours, and it has done nothing but impress me. I know some of you guys don't like the design, but 125 HP plus 80-75 bulk, which is better than obviously our garbage friend in F tier here, but what it has is so much utility. It does have access to Roost for reliable recovery. It can Stealth Rock, it can Glare, it can Coil, it can Calm Mind. It has great mixed attacking stats, and you can go with things like Hyper Drill plus like Drill Run, or you can go with Boom Burst plus Flamethrower, or whatever ice coverage you want to go with. It has great coverage overall. I said Drill Run like it doesn't get Earthquake, sorry. Like Hyper Drill plus Earthquake or something like that. You can go with boosting sets, like I said. You can go with fat glaring sets. You can do a ton of different things with the Dunsparce here. And I think it's an absolutely incredible Pokemon. And it's insanely bulky for its price point and things like that. I think for its price point, as a low tier normal, this is going to be my new Licky of the generation. Absolutely love this Pokemon. He has done nothing but impress me every single time I've drafted him. Okay, next up we have Spidops, and Spidops is going to go here in D tier. Now, I think Spidops is terrible, but there is something that it does offer, and since it is one of the very few sticky webbers in the format, one of the very few sticky webbers in the format, it does also have access to spikes and toxic spikes, so it sets up a lot of hazards, and it is, I was going to say decently bulky, but not really. It has a very underwhelming stat spread. It does have some cool coverage moves and things like that, but it's very not strong, it's very not fast, and it's not very bulky. But if you have like that hyper offense type squad and you really want those webs, I do suppose it's worth the team slot for its price point. I'm going to go ahead and put in D. I'm personally not a big sticky web guy, especially in formats that do include heavy duty boots, which we do know that this generation boots have returned from the Galar region. So I'm not super big on that as a whole. But yeah, that's just my personal take on it. Next up, we have low kicks, and this is a Pokemon, again, I was sleeping on it pretty heavy when the gen came out, but I am, again, very pleasantly surprised at how solid low kicks has been. It's our first bug dark type, which is pretty darn cool, and it does have access to Tinted Lens, which is a great ability on a bug type, basically giving you a guaranteed unresisted U-turn on everything, which can be incredibly strong. It has great priority options in First Impression and Sucker Punch. It can Swords Dance up, but really it's coming in to kind of just click attacking moves, you know? It has access to Axe Kick, which is a really, really strong, basically high jump kick clone, to do a ton of damage to anything that resists bug and dark. But again, you're rocking out with that Tinted Lens. You don't really have resist, which is awesome. So it makes your stab combination very, very spammable. It can taunt. It's decently fast in base 92, and 102 is pretty strong as well. So I think it's like a mid to low tier breaker. Low Kicks is going to be a very strong Pokemon. Now I think as like the dex opens up and we get post-home and maybe a DLC and some of the old Pokemon come back, you're going to see Low Kicks fade into obscurity. But I think like early meta Paldea decks only formats, this thing can definitely thrive right now, and I would definitely recommend picking it up and trying it out now if you do want to try it out. Now, next up we have, I think its name is Rabaska. Yeah, Big Rabaska, which is going to go down here. Oh man, I don't know how I feel about this thing, man. 115, does that recover? It does recover. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put him in C tier right now. Now, this is with Revival Blessing banned, and I want to keep that in mind for when we get to our friend Palmo down here, or whatever his name is, Palm the Third. I don't know. We're gonna go ahead and put this in D tier, assuming that Revival Blessing is banned, because the move inherently on its own is a very broken concept. I have not seen a single draft league yet allowing the move. If you're allowing the move, this thing jumps in viability because you have a free revive on your team, and that's inherently just broken in my opinion. So I would just like to you guys to keep that in mind right now. I'm assuming that this thing doesn't have access to it. With that being said, it is decently bulky, right? 75, 80, 100 bulk is pretty solid. It's very strong with base 115 special attack and some solid coverage. With Bug and Psychic, it also has access to Dazzling Gleam. It has access to Earth Power. It has access to Power Gem, which is interesting. Shadow Ball, Stored Power. It can Recover. It can Calm Mind. It can do a bunch of, it can Iron Defense, so you can even run with Iron, Double Dance variants and things like that. With Boots, it has good longevity. So I think like, as like a low tier, like sweeper kind of threat, it could do some stuff. I'm kind of partial to something like an Orbeetle, personally, because it's a lot faster and it had access to Sticky Web and Body Press and, you know, could kind of facilitate cheesy setup strats a little bit more. But this thing's a lot more immediately powerful, and can definitely do some funny stuff in my opinion. So I definitely don't think this Pokemon's like unviable, and I kind of was thinking it was initially, and I was actually thinking like, man, this is a D tier Pokemon, but like looking at its stats right here on my other monitor, it's really not all too bad. It's not great. It has access to Memento, which is another great tool as well, on top of broken Revival Blessing. But again, we're not gonna talk about that because it's not going to be allowed in any league that kind of knows what they're doing. I'm going to trip over bed, so I'm a little tired. Alright, next up we have Houndstone. This is going to be one of the hotter takes of this video. I'm going to go ahead and put Houndstone in C tier as well. The Uber Pokemon! Now, for those of you who came to my channel watching like Smogon content and Smogon battles, this is not a reflection of how good Houndstone is in Smogon. And no, I'm not, I guess tiering this thing as if Last Respects is banned. No. Keep in mind that in Draft League, you know your opponent's team going in, right? I know my opponent's team. I know that they have Houndstone, and I know that they have the potential to Last Respects through my entire team. That means I can prepare much easier game plans than my team in the ladder might be able to, especially in Draft League when you're typically going to see Ghost Resist being very important. Your OU team might not have good Ghost Resist, but in Draft League, you have up to usually around 11 Pokemon on your roster. You're probably going to have a Ghost Resist, and you're more than likely going to have a bulky normal. And with Houndstone, that's its thing. Its gimmick is clicking the Ghost button. And if you have something that stops it from clicking the Ghost button, it is not threatening anymore. And in a draft league setting where I'm going to be drafting a normal type, especially in a format where something like this is running around, it really, really hurts the value of it. Now, there is some value inherently in forcing your opponent to bring their normal type. Maybe it has a bad matchup, and maybe you can really take advantage of it. Maybe you have a great fighting type in the back, like a Quackleval, to where when you're in with your Houndstone, you can make that aggressive double into your Quackleval and get a free Swords Dance because you know that normal type's coming in. But that's Draft League in general. There are plenty of Pokemon that force prep like that and force play like that. That's where the format's so much fun. So I'm personally not too big on Houndstone. I've already played it in a Draft League game, and my normal type on my team was a Staraptor. I didn't even bring Intim because my opponent had a Defiant Pokemon. I brought Reckless Staraptor as my check to this thing. Decently bulky, but Reckless Staraptor as my check to this thing. And it didn't do jack shit against my team because I had an immunity to Last Respects. It's the Dracovish of this generation, but Dracovish was much better in Draft League because Water Absorb wasn't as common, and you could kind of bully and push past your Water Resist checks, whereas there's a lot more normal types than there are Water Absorb Pokemon. So I think that's something very, very important to keep in mind. Houndstone. And with Draft League in general, when you're looking at it opposed to like Smogon or anything like that, I don't think it's a terrible Pokemon that can't be drafted or anything like that. But still, just something to keep in mind. Okay, next up, we have Espathra. We're going to go ahead and put Espathra in B tier. This Pokemon is cheese incarnate, and he pisses me off. I mean, I really like it. I think it's an awesome design. I used it in game. But man, this Pokemon is cheese incarnate. With Speed Boost and Calm Mind, this thing can get out of hand so fast with Stored Power variants. So fast. Just Stored Power, Dazzling Gleam, Calm Mind, potentially Roost, potentially Sub. There's a bunch of different options that this guy can go for. And it can be absolutely obnoxious to build for. Spoilers, my first Draft League Wi-Fi game on the channel, we play in Espathra, and I had so much prep dedicated to this thing just so it didn't run through my team. Like, absolutely run through me. So, I think this Pokemon is incredibly obnoxious and very hard to deal with, and you need a lot of prep towards it. And on top of that, you don't need to go with like the cheese sets. I think like Life Orb Lumina Crash sets are gonna be really scary on this thing with the Speed Boost. Lumina Crash is a base 80 power move that always drops your opponent's Spadef by 2, which is really, really potent and really strong, especially in a format with really limited steel types, and you have coverage for those dark types and Dazzling Gleam. So this thing can get out of hand pretty fast. I'm a big Espathra fan. I think it's an absolutely demonic Pokemon and really scares me. Okay, next up, we have Farigiraf here. Now, Farigiraf is another Pokemon I'm not huge on. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier. I do think that it does have something that's very, very valuable right now, and that's going to be Wish and a normal typing with a very high HP stat. This is a generation where we saw a lot of recovery moves really nerfed and neutered, and things like that. So having a Pokemon with 16 PP on its recovery move that can not only keep itself healthy, but everything else on its team healthy is very, very valuable in its own right. It has a solid move pool. It can Nasty Plot. It can Trick Room, which is really cool on a Pokemon with base 60 speed. So that's also really nice. And even like being OTR itself, like Offensive Trick Room itself, I think that's a very valuable thing and something cool that it can really accomplish. It has great coverage. It can go physical as well if you really need to, or mixed with like Earthquake. So I think maybe like an OTR, like 3 attacks, Trick Room, like mix it with like Earthquake for steals, Dazzling Gleam, and then Psychic is pretty darn awesome. And again, it provides good support to the rest of your team with access to that Wish, keeping everything healthy and being that Ghost immunity, which is awesome. Like I said earlier when we were talking about the Dunsparce, there's not a lot of Ghost immunities in the format, or a lot of great ones at the very least. And I feel like this one's definitely a really good one with its great HP stat and solid bulk. 120, 70, 70 is pretty darn bulky, so definitely a solid Pokemon. Then we go to a terrible Pokemon. We're gonna put Wugtrio in F tier. Now, as strong as Whipple Dive right here is, it's really not, unfortunately. Any Pokemon that is Dugtrio but not Dugtrio is always doomed to fail. It has very similar, I think it has the same stats as Dugtrio, but doesn't have access to a pure ground typing with Arena Trap, which is what makes Dougie so potent and so solid. This thing is gooey with no bulk. I mean, I guess Rattled and Sandvale as well. But it's not strong. Pure Water isn't great offensive typing. It just doesn't do much, unfortunately, for me. It also has like a mostly special move pool when it comes to like solid moves. So I don't know. Not too big on our friend Wugtrio here, unfortunately. It does have big old Triple Dive, which is pretty base. 90 base powers or anything stronger in his move pool besides Triple Dive. Just kind of have to, well, Triple Dive is his best move. but it can miss, and Liquidation can't at base at 85. So I don't know. You kind of pick your poison there. I suppose. Okay. Next up, we have the Dondozo, who's also gonna go here in B tier. Now, I think on the OU ladder, again, it's a lot more potent, but you're gonna see it's not gonna be as scary when you know what you're dealing with, and you can kind of use its passivity against. It's not that it can't attack, and it's not like a strong Pokemon. Base 100 is pretty solid. And again, it's incredibly bulky. 150, 115, and 65 is great if you're investing at Spadef, but it is taunt fodder. It doesn't have great recovery outside of rest, and it is very, very telegraphed as to like how it's going to work. As like Edgequake plus like Liquidation Ice Fang is like basically the coverage that you're rocking out with this guy, which is solid enough. Or I guess Wave Crash is another option, which is solid enough, but again, very, very predictable and very, very, a little bit easier to play around, in my opinion, in a draft league setting, where opposed to having 6 teams that are good on the OU, 6 mons that are good on the OU ladder, you have 11 things in your team, and I guarantee you have something that can beat a Dondozo if you're playing properly. I think this is definitely going to be like a noob killer Pokemon. It's going to really, like, newer players are really going to struggle with Dondozo, but, like, other than that, I think it's definitely something that is, able to work around, like something you're able to work around. Alright, next up we have Veluza, and I don't know if I want to put this thing in F tier or what, man, because it's really not that good. Now, it does have like a Shell Smash-esque move and like Fillet Away, which is basically like Shell Smash and Belly Drum had a baby, but like that's just worse than Shell Smash, unfortunately. If this thing had Shell Smash, I think it would be maybe a little bit more likely to be like a D tier Pokemon. I'm going to go ahead and put it in D tier. It might be the bottom of D tier, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it there. It's decently strong. I hate that they made a Pokemon that's worse Bruxish when Bruxish is already Bruxish. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. Fillet Away is probably gonna be what this thing does. Maybe on screens, like this thing can do something. It has solid coverage. Jet, Drill Run, Crunch, Psychic Fangs, Liquidation, probably. Yep, Liquidation, Ice Fang, things like that. So, like, there's definitely options. It can go mix. It has stored power, too, which might be funny. It even gets Recover for some reason. They give this thing Recover, but won't give it to Claydol, by the way. It's messed up. But it also has Final Gambit with base 90 HP, so that's something else you could do, like a Scarf Final Gambit variant or something like that. But again, worst Bruxish is doomed to be worse than Spite-Ups, unfortunately. Alright, next up, I think we finally have our first S-tier Pokemon, though, and Big Palafin. This Pokemon, initially I was kind of like, man, that's kind of annoying that you have to switch out and switch back in for it to do good. But when you switch out and switch back in, you have like Groudon BST. Bro, it don't matter. 160 base attack with great bulk and 100 base speed. This thing is a demon. Whether it be with like just choice band sets and breaking through things, or choice scarf sets and flip turning around and gaining momentum and being a nuisance, or bulk up variants with taunt, drain punch, bulk up, jet punch, which is just better Aqua Jet, which is incredible. You can wave crash and just nuke through things. You have great coverage overall with Wave Crash or Liquidation or Jet Punch, and then having access to Ice Punch and having access to Flip Turn and Close Combat and Drain Punch and a bunch of crazy things. You even have Grass Knot with a very usable special attack set. I think in Draft League in particular, like you're gonna see like Life Orb mixed Grass Knot sets and things like that, which is definitely really cool. You can even agility through teams and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool things that this guy can do. This Pokemon is going to be absolutely obnoxious to deal with for so many different squads. Like, I really think that Palafin is going to be a top tier meta threat in Paldea Dex leagues for sure. Okay, next up we have Arboliva, who's going to go down here in D tier. I think it's going to sit towards the top of D tier, but Arboliva definitely looks very, very solid as like a low tier grass. I think the normal typing is pretty bunk and kind of holds it back a little bit, but it is like the only grassy terrain setter in the meta, so it does give it a niche in that sense. It doesn't set grassy terrain immediately, which sucks, but it does have an ability that when you're hit by an attack, grassy terrain pops, which can be cool and potentially getting you more grassy terrain turns, maybe on a sack or something like that. It has good coverage overall too. Getting Earth Power is a great tool, as well as Dazzling Gleam, and you can Giga Drain, and you can Strength Sap for recovery and do or Synthesis for recovery. You can Leech Up, you can Screens, you can Memento. So like that's like a low tier budget like Ground Resist and like Spadef Wall, or a bunch of different things. I think it's actually pretty solid. You can Memento, which is cool. You can Encore, so it has great utility. It's a pretty solid Pokemon nonetheless. I think D tier is it's a very like close to C tier, D tier Pokemon. So we're gonna keep it there for now. Okay, next up we have Skullvillain. I'm gonna go and put Skullvillain at the top of C tier because it really lacks the versatility to function on every team, right? This thing only is going to be good on Sun. But I do think it is going to be very solid on Sun, and is the only like pure Sun abuser. Now, obviously, the past Paradox Pokemon can abuse Sun, but not to the level of like Chlorophyll sweeping and things like that. And that's what Scovillain does. It's our first Grass and Fire typing, and like that's a great stab combo. It has a solid physical and special attack stat, both being 108, so it can be both, which is really darn cool. I wish it got Flare Blitz. It does not get Flare Blitz, though, which would have been cool. But it can be very strong specially and physically. You can run with cool, like, Overheat plus, like, physical grass sets or something like that, like Overheat Stomping. I don't know. There's a lot of really cool things that this guy can do. And it's going to be very strong under Sun and very, very annoying for some teams to deal with. It does have access to growth as well. And I did see this thing with Terra Fire. Oko Salamence at +2 without a Life Orb with Flamethrower in the Sun. So, like, it's going to be very strong and very potent. I think, like, Terra Fire Scovillains, if you're doing Terra Captains, is definitely a very worthwhile adventure. Or, worthwhile adventure. I don't know. Very solid Pokemon, though. I like it a lot. Now, we have Big Belly Bolt. I'm going to go ahead and put Belly Bolt probably here in D tier. As much as I love the cute little guy, he is just but a Belly Bolt. But decently bulky, honestly. A lot bulkier than I thought it was going to be. 109, 91, 83 is pretty solid. And it does, again, have access to Slack Off. So they're giving reliable recovery to a lot of these Pokemon. It has a pretty shallow move pool. But something it can do is it does have access to Muddy Water, which I think is really, really incredible for this guy. Having a Electric that can not be immensely passive against grounds is nice. You can hit them pretty darn hard, especially as you catch them on the switch in and things like that, which is great. Not only is Electromorphosis a solid, ability giving you just a charge instantly. Static is also great, spreading status. It can Volt Switch around. It can Thunder Wave things probably. Yep, it sure can. It can do some fun things like that, and it does have access to dual screens. So I think like as a dual screen setter, it could be solid. And again, it's just a very, very solid Pokemon overall, and decently strong as well with 103 base special attack. So decent enough. Next up, we have Reveroom, which I am going to put at the bottom of C tier. Now, Reveroom does have a niche in being a steel type, which is definitely really cool in a meta where there's not a lot of steel types. And it can go ahead and set up Toxic Spikes and things like that. It's a grounded poison. Overcoat is an okay ability, as well as Filter is a great ability. The biggest issue with Reveroom, in my opinion, is like a shift gear sweeper, and I feel like that's the role it really wants to fill with that base 119 attack, is the fact that it doesn't have any real way of hitting steel types. It can bulldoze, and it also doesn't get like the moves that it gets in game, like the Blazing Torque and shit like that. So bulldoze really is your best way of hitting those kinds of Pokemon, I guess, and Overheat, like a mixed Life Orb Overheat set, but you got 54 special attack, so like really are you hitting anything hard with Overheat? So it really does struggle in hitting Pokemon hard from that physical side on like steel type Pokemon, things like that. So I think that's really going to hold it back as a sweeper. And it's a little bit more offensive than I like out of most steel types. But again, it is solid offensively. Filter is a good defensive ability, and it can, be a pretty big nuisance. It can also Magnet Rise too, which is pretty nice as you like shift gear up, like shift gear, bulldoze, Magnet Rise, and then 1 or 2 stabs depending on the matchup. Probably Steel Stab if I had to assume. Maybe Gunk Shot, I don't know, or Poison Jab. But again, it's an interesting Pokemon. Maybe I'm sleeping on it a little too hard right now, but maybe it'll be pretty solid. Who knows? Next up, we have Big Earthworm Gym. I'm going to go ahead and put it again, probably here in C tier. I think I'm going to value it a little bit higher than some of these guys here. I think Earthworm's great. It's basically Steelix with spikes. I guess would be a very interesting way. And immune to, immune to ground, which is pretty incredible as a steel type. Anytime you're immune to ground, it's going to be nice. It's like a very Steelix-esque stat spread. It's a little bit less bulky, but I think it has a little bit more utility than Slinky Six, which is coming from an absolute Steelix stan in Draft League. I love that Pokemon. And I'm bummed it's not in the decks right now, but again, I think Earthworm kind of does some really cool things here. Again, being Earth Eater, having great physical defense, you can coil, you can spike, you can stealth rock, you can body press, and again, you are immune to that, those ground attacks, which is a great weakness to get taken away from a steel type, especially a bulkier one. So I think like with proper wish support, this guy could be pretty demon, pretty annoying, or even just like Lefties plus Protect, it could be annoying. Like Iron Defense sets are very viable with body press and cool stuff like that. So big Earthworm fan. I could definitely see myself drafting him. He's got really funny little arms too when he like wants to fight. So I'm here for him. It's my guy. I'll be drinking more coffee as we go throughout because I'm realizing that this is going to be a longer video. And I don't want my coffee to get cold because I don't want to heat it up at midnight when I finish recording this. Okay. Next up, we have Mousehold. Man, more hot takes. I'm putting this shit in D tier. I don't know. Again, I understand it has a move that hits 10 times. That's really strong. It is. But again, remember, we're in a counter team format, right? We are in a format where we know what our opponent can have. And in a counter team format, we can run Rocky Helmet. We can switch into our Ghost type, which, yes, it has a Technician Bite and Beat Up and things like that. Sure, man. 100%. I understand that there's things that you can do with your Mousehold. Maybe you can even be protective pads on your Mousehold so that you're not taking the Rocky Helmet damage. But then you're most likely not getting 10 hits on your Population Bomb, and you're not really doing the damage that you want to do with this guy. And I think that's where the cheese comes from him. It's going to be getting those 10-hit Population Bombs and really just smashing through people. And again, I feel like this is an absolute noob killer, this Pokemon. Like, it's really good at beating people who probably won't be too experienced, I suppose. But between Helmet and Ghosts and faster Pokemon and Scarfers and things like that, I really don't see this thing really thriving in a draft league setting. I just really don't. Call me crazy, I could be completely tripping, but I do not think this Pokemon is all too great. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong. I don't hope I'm wrong. I think it's a stupid design too. He's just mice. He's just a family of mice, which is very lazy and lame. Do better, Game Freak. Okay, next up we have Titan. I'm going to go ahead and put Titan at the top of B tier here. I know a lot of people are thinking that this thing is heavily overrated right now, but I do think it's very solid. Not only because of like the big buffs that Hail got, or I guess Snow now. Still calling it Hail and you can't stop me. Not only because of the big buffs that got, right? Because it definitely did see some big buffs. But I think this Pokemon's solid outside of Snow. Like, I really, really do think it's very solid. Now, in Snow, it's great. Base 73 speed, making it the fastest Slush Rush user. 113 attack. Great coverage options between Earthquake and Icicle Crash / Spinner and Liquidation and Play Rough and Superpower and all this crazy stuff. But also having access to Thick Fat as a great, pretty much, you know, double ice, 4 times ice resist, as well as making it neutral to fire, which is awesome. But also as a sheer force Pokemon. This thing with a Life Orb and a sheer force and Ice Shard and Earthquake and or Play Rough potentially and Liquidation and Icicle Crash and things like that. This thing could be a really potent wall breaker. It has a solid speed tier. It's very bulky. I think Assault Vest sets will be solid. I think like boots for attack sets will be solid. I think Life Orb sets are going to be great. I think this thing plus a Abomasnow or this thing plus Slowking is going to be a great core. I really think this guy's cool. And he's got one of the best shinies in the game too. So like there's something else to keep in mind. It's definitely really solid. So I'm definitely a big Titan fan. And I definitely think it's going to be very solid. Next up, we have Baxcalibur. Absolute demon of a wall breaker. I'm going to go ahead and put Baxcalibur here at the bottom of A tier, but I definitely do think it's a solid Pokemon. Another ice type. Another Pokemon that definitely appreciates being with like something like Slowking. Well, it's not a like traditional Hail Sweeper, I suppose. Or like Snow Sweeper. It definitely does appreciate the defense boost. Having 115 base HP and then 92, 86 bulk is really solid. Dragon Ice is an incredible offensive typing we've seen from the likes of Kyurem before. Now, this guy has great coverage overall between things like Earthquake and Iron Head if you really want it. It can Sword Stance, it has Ice Shard, it has Zen Headbutt, Crunch, Brick Break. A bunch of really cool tools. It can Dragon Dance as well. And then its signature move in Glaive Rush, which is 120 base power. And the only downside is that you take double damage the next turn after you use it, or like the subsequent attack after you use it, which is, you know, a downside for sure, but not really that big one for a 100% accurate outrage base power dragon move, which is really incredible. Like, that's a really strong move, and I've seen it absolutely nuke through some things. It has a really cool signature ability in Thermal Exchange, which raises its attack by 1 when it's hit by fire moves, and it can't be burned, which is really solid on a Sword Stance or Dragon Dance Sweeper. And especially under the Hail, something like clicking like Flare Blitz or something like that into your ice types, you basically resist it with the defense boost, and then you're getting a +1 attack, and then you're threatening them out with an Earthquake and setting up a Dragon Dance or a Swords Dance and just cleaving through some teams. So I think this Pokemon's going to be really solid. I like it a lot. It might not be the best pseudo we've ever gotten, but it's definitely a very good Pokemon nonetheless. So pretty impressed with our boy here. Okay. Next up, we have Tatsugiri. Now, forgive me, I'm not super familiar on Tatsugiri. He does have some funny things. It has its first ability, which is going to be Commander, which is basically a doubles only ability with Big Don Dojo up here, which is definitely a really funny interaction. But also has access to Storm Dream as a hidden ability, which is going to be what it runs in singles, obviously, giving it a water immunity and raising its special attack by 1 if a water move comes out, which is obviously going to be very solid. It has Baton Pass for momentum. It can Draco, it can Surf, it can Nasty Plot, it can Taunt, it can Memento, which is pretty darn cool. And it can rock out with, it can Rapid Spin as well. I did not know it could spin. That's definitely pretty cool. This thing's not that bad, man. 120 base special attack, 82 speed isn't incredible, and it's very frail physically, but not the worst Pokemon in the world for a little guy like Tatsugiri. I'm not too, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm still gonna put him in D tier, but I'm pleasantly surprised with Tatsugiri. And Dragon Water is a very good defensive typing, keep in mind. Like, that's a very solid defensive typing. Does not get Ice Beam. I'm so mad at you, Tatsugiri. Why you only get Icy Wind? Are you kidding me? Come on, bro. You're better than that. I know you're strong enough to muster up an Ice Beam if you can Icy Wind. But, you know, not that bad. Okay, next up we have our good friend Cyclozar with Shed Tail banned. And that's the same thing with Orthworm. I'm kind of like assuming that Shed Tail's banned because it should be. Usually in Draft League, Sub Pass is banned. Sub plus Baton Pass is banned, right? You can only Dry Pass. 99% of leagues at this point, in my opinion, right? So think of Sub Pass, but in one move. And especially on this guy with regen on top of that. Like, we're assuming that it's banned when I rank this guy. Okay, same thing with Orthworm. Orthworm would be a little bit higher too, but especially with Cyclozar. But still, I'm gonna go ahead and put him at the top of B tier. I know this is crazy, even without Shed Tail. I think this Pokemon has incredible utility. It can still grab momentum with U-turn. It can knock off. It can rapid spin. It has great coverage overall. Like, jack of all trades. This thing can click so many different buttons. It can be physical or special. It can knock off, rapid spin, taunt, U-turn, like we've already said. It can Draco. It can throw off a Dragon Claw if you want to. It has fire coverage in either Fire Fang or Overheat. It can Power Whip for some reason. T-Bolt and Wild Charge. Like, it has some. It can shift gear too. I mean, if you get a little saucy and you want to sweep with your Cyclozar, you could definitely do so. This is a Pokemon I could definitely see myself using, and I could definitely think I'd get a lot of utility out of, even without Shed Tail. With Shed Tail, it's damn near an S tier Pokemon. Keep that in mind. Like, I think that move is inherently broken, though. Like, inherently very broken. Okay. Next up, we have Big Pawmot. Revival Blessing banned, ladies and gentlemen. Keep in mind. We're gonna go ahead and put this guy. I think I'm gonna go ahead and put him in B tier. Even without that, 105 base speed and 115 attack is very solid on an electric fighting type. Has access to Volt Absorb and Iron Fist and Natural Cure. So 3 great abilities in Draft League. It can be a status absorber, it can be an electric immunity, or it can be a very strong breaker with Iron Fist. Again, with access to elemental punches plus its stabs is going to be incredible. It can Mach Punch for priority. It can Play Rough. It can Seed Bomb. It can Volt Switch around. It does have that move Double Shock, which is 120 base power, just electric type burn up. Very fast Encore. It does have a very fast Taunt. It does have Wish as well, which is really interesting. I don't know how great it would be on it, but it does have access to Wish. It can Baton Pass for momentum that's not blocked by ground types, which is, again, very valuable. And very solid overall. I like this guy a lot. I think he's definitely very solid. So, big Pawmot fan. Excuse me. Next up, we have Kilowattrel. Baby Zapdos do. I'm gonna go ahead and put this guy. Where is he? I'm gonna go ahead and put him in C tier here, ahead of our good friend Low-Kicks. I definitely think this thing has some good viability. It's very frail, but Electric Flying is very good defensive typing. It has access to Volt Absorb as well as competitive and Wind Power, which is very niche. Not super big on that thing there. But Volt Absorb and competitive are great abilities. It can Volt Switch or U-turn. It does have access to Hurricane as well as electric coverage and like Discharge, Thunderbolt, and all that stuff, which is going to be great. It can go ahead and Roost. And Defog is a very fast defogger. It cannot, unfortunately. But 125 base speed in a meta like this is going to be an incredible tool. I think it's like a mid-tier mon. It's definitely worth picking up. I'm definitely a big Kilowattrel guy. I think it's definitely worth a shot on your team, for sure. Okay, then we have Bombardier, which is definitely an interesting Pokemon. I don't know how I really feel about it. Its stat spread, incredibly mediocre. It does have 3 stabs with Rocky Payload, basically giving it like it's like a rock type steel worker for Delmise. It does have access to knock and U-turn. Does it get access to defog or Ruskies? It doesn't, which would have upped my opinion on it immensely. But knock off Brave Bird. It can parting shot. It can also U-turn. It can sucker punch. Like, it's decent offensively. And 103 attack isn't terrible, but the rest of its stats are pretty bad. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in D tier. I'm not super big on this Pokemon. I don't know if I would particularly draft it myself. I'm gonna put it behind Belly here. Maybe I'll end up drafting it. Who knows? Maybe it's a dark type. It's not that bad. Who knows? It could be tripping. Next we have Squawkabilly, who's gonna go down here in F tier. He has a very funny name, and I like his design a lot. Squawkabilly's a cute guy. It either has access to access to Intimidate and Hustle guaranteed, but it also can be Guts or Sheer Force depending on like the color variant that it is. But its stats are really bad. Its highest stat is going to be 96 in its attack. It has 92 speed and 82 HP. The rest of its stats are 51 and lower, so not the best in the world, unfortunately. But it does have solid coverage and normal flying, solid offensively. It doesn't get close combat, so it is just a Raptor at home, unfortunately. But they can also parting shot and do some funny things like that. So not the worst thing in the world. Foul play, I guess, is funny. And Tim's always a great ability. Like, all of its ability options are great as well. Just not the strongest thing in the world, unfortunately. And Big Squawkabilly, I can see it being a really good Nuzlocke Pokemon, depending on which ability you end up getting or whatever it may be. So, yeah, that's Big Squawkabilly. Okay. Next up, we have Big Flamigo, and this Pokemon surprised me with its, what do you call it? With its offensives and things like that. This thing is strong and fast. For a Pokemon you get so early in the game, Scrappy has a great ability in singles. 115 attack and 90 speed is great. Flying and fighting is a phenomenal stab combination. You get access to close combat and Brave Bird and Liquidation and U-turn and Swords Dance and Roost. Like, again, that's really all you get. You also get Throat Chop for Ghost if you really need it, but you're Scrappy, so you don't need it. Like, this thing is Baby Gyapdos or Zapdos Galar at home, and he's definitely a very solid Pokemon. I am going to go ahead and put him in C tier. I was very impressed by this guy, and I could super see myself drafting him. I think he's pretty darn strong. I think he's a stupid name and a stupid design, but is a very solid Pokemon nonetheless, and I can't deny that. Okay, next up we got Big Cloth, who has Regenerator for some reason. The best ability in the game, Cloth has for some reason. It can be a Stealth Rocker. I don't think it can be a Spiker, unfortunately. If it had spikes as well, it would just be better Crustal, but it doesn't, unfortunately. It does have Knockoff, which is solid coverage. You can like Knockoff and High Horsepower. It doesn't get Earthquake. And Rock Slide. It can Swords Dance up, which is solid enough. Be a big nuisance in that sense. It can X-Scissor as if it was a bug. It kind of looks like a bug too. I keep forgetting it's not a bug as well. It also gets access to Crab Hammer as it's kind of a crab as well. I don't know. I'm kind of confused on what Cloth is going for here. Not the best Pokemon in the world, but definitely not bad. Anything with Regenerator is somewhat worth drafting. I'm going to go ahead and put it in D tier right here below Arboliva, but I definitely think it's something I might end up drafting myself. Okay, next up is Garganacl, the GOAT. Despite looking like a Minecraft character, he does get to come up here in B tier, and it's definitely a very solid Pokemon. It's essentially a Ghost Resist, which again, like we've mentioned, is a very valuable thing. Purifying Salt also makes it act as a, what do you call it? I'm blanking on its name. Status Absorber, which is solid. It gets Recover for recovery. It can Stealth Rock up. It can go ahead and not throw spikes, unfortunately. That's lame. Or it can also go ahead and throw Iron Defense and Body Press shenanigans. It has Edge Quake coverage. It also has Elemental Punches, which is, again, very solid. It can do a lot of really cool things. I think it's a very solid Terra Captain as well, with like Terra Water or Terra Fairy. It could be very annoying for some teams to deal with. Heavy Slam's another coverage option for it. And it can do some really fun things. So I'm definitely a big Garganacl fan. I think it's very annoying. Body Press, obviously. I don't know if I mentioned Body Press, but it does get access to Body Press. So definitely a very solid Pokemon. And something I can definitely see myself drafting here in the future. I also think Knackle Stack is viable enough. I'm going to go ahead and put it here in F tier. I wouldn't draft it myself, but it does have some viability as an NFE Pokemon with an Eviolite, because it does get a lot of very similar moves. Okay, next up is Glimmora, and it might be a hot take. I'm going to put Glimmora in A tier. I know Hazard Stack oriented Pokemon like Glimmora aren't going to be as good as that role in a draft league format when you know Glamora is on the other team. I get that. I think it is much worse at being a hazard stack herder as it is in like a standard format, right? But I think people are really sleeping on the offensive potential of Glamora. I really, really do. It's stronger than Nihilego with Earth Power as an option, which Nihi doesn't have. Now, Nihi's a better sweeper, right? Because Nihi can speed boost, Nihi can throw off meteor beams, and do things like that. But this Pokemon is strong, man. With access to triple hazards, which is obviously great, having access to an ability that guarantees sets up toxic spikes if you're hit by a physical move, which is just so annoying to build around. It can Dazzling Gleam, Earth Power, Energy Ball, Flash Cannon, Power Gem, Sludge Bomb / Wave. Like, it can Memento, which is great. It can dual screens. Like, it can Spiky Shield. It has a lot. Immortal Spin for removal. Again, a removal option that poisons things. Like, it's a very, very solid Pokemon. I think people are super sleeping on Glamora because they see it as, like, hazard stack herder, like it is on the ladder. But it does so much more, really. Like, it really is a solid Pokemon. I'm a big Glamora guy. I just recently drafted it, and I used it in my first game, and I only got up 1 layer, or like 2 layers of hazards with it, but like more so used it offensively at the beginning of the game, and I was so happy with how it went. So, definitely big fan of that Pokemon. I think people are super sleeping on it. Okay, next up we have Grafaiai, which is a Pokemon that Aquarius is absolutely swearing up and down about. It does have access to Poison Touch, which is a very solid ability on a Pokemon that is very fast and can U-turn around and be a big nuisance. It does also have access to Knockoff. It does. It has access to Knockoff, which is a very valuable tool this generation, like we said. Very fast Encore. It can Gunk Shot. It can Super Fang. It can even Swords Dance, which is pretty darn cool, to be completely honest. And it's a very fast Pokemon. Not very bulky, but Poison Normal is solid enough defensive typing with its resistance as is. You can also Parting Shot. So, I definitely don't think it's bad. I don't think it's like Jesus like she thinks it is. I think it's definitely a lower tier Pokemon, but it is something for sure. And I think I'm gonna go ahead. Does this thing have any normal stat that'll ever actually click though? Does it not even get like, it's like Facade, I guess? Does it get like Body Slam? I think it's Body Slam. You can't slam your body into things with Grafaiai. No Double Edge? Dude, Double Edge like a poison would be so cool. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put Grafaiai here in C tier. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think its speed tier makes it valuable enough to put it in C tier. Okay, next up we have Daoshibun right here, which is a pretty interesting Pokemon, right? It's a fairy type that, like, theoretically can beat fire types with Stomping Tantrum plus Well-Baked Body, which makes it immune by fire moves and raises defense by 2 stages if it's hit by 1. And Stomping Tantrum is a way to hit them, which I think is important that they gave it that. There's access to the Elemental Fangs as well as Crunch and things like that. It can also Wish, but it has a god-awful HP stat of 57. 115 defense is pretty solid, and 80 speed F definitely isn't bad. 90 speed is cool. I think it's more so self-sustaining Wish as opposed to passing it to teammates, which is a bit of a downside for me personally. But I think, like, in a format with so little fairies, it is valuable in its own sense to have something like this. I'm going to put it in C tier. I think its stats are a little bit something to be desired. Only 80 base attack too. But nonetheless, it is valuable in its own right as a fairy, as a wishing mon. And as a fire immunity, because it's never bad to have a fire immunity, right? Okay. Next up, we have Mabostiff, which is definitely a pretty interesting Pokemon. I'm not too sure on how I feel about this guy either. He's definitely adorable. Definitely the cutest dog out of all the dog Pokemon that we got this generation. It does have access to Intimidate and Stake Out. Guard Dog is a signature ability that sucks, so we're not really going to talk about it. Might be nice in some niche matchup. Stake Out is a really strong offensive ability with 120 attack. That's definitely really cool, especially with the coverage that this guy has, and like Elemental Fangs plus Crunch plus Play Rough, I guess Outrage and Psychic Fangs too, Wild Charge, stuff like that. Stake Out, forcing a switch, whatever you're hitting on the switch in is definitely going to be getting hit hard, and Intim's always going to be a great ability. I'm going to go ahead and put it in C tier here with Daoshibun. A little bit lower just because typing isn't as good, but it's still important to have a dark type, so yeah, I can see someone drafting this as like a psychic answer or whatever it may be. Decently bulky, 85 base speed isn't terrible, so not awful. Next up is Brambleghast. I'm convinced it's pretty terrible. It's very frail. It's kind of strong offensively, but it has no physical ghost stab. It can rapid spin, I suppose, and shadow sneak. as well as Spike Up and Leech Seed. I don't know. I'm gonna hot take and go ahead and put this guy in F tier. I'm not too big on Bramble Gas. I don't think it's going to be very viable in a draft league setting. A Pokemon we do think is going to be very viable though is Big Goldango, and I think I'm gonna put him in S tier. That Ghost and Steel typing is nasty, plus an amazing ability and good as gold, making it immune to status moves, which means whether that be Will-O-Wisp coming its way or a Thunder Wave or a Defog, blocking Defog as well as blocking Spin. This is the ultimate hazard stack Pokemon. If you want a team that really punches opposing teams with hazards, I feel like Goldango is an incredibly valuable pickup. Ghost and Steel is also incredible defensively and offensively, especially with access to Focus Blast on this thing. It also gets access to Recover for reliable recovery. It can Nasty Plot. It can also like T-Bolt and Power Gem if you need it to, or Dazzling Gleam. So it has good coverage overall as well, and can be a big nuisance for a lot of teams. And it has a really strong special attack stat in 133. So this guy's hard to switch into with Spectre, or even a Scarf. It's like a revenge killer slash endgame cleaner. Like I'm definitely a big Goldango fan for sure. Now we're getting into like the good Pokemon now. We have like all these like, you know, legendary Pokemon and what do you call it, paradox Pokemon, things like that. We're gonna go ahead and grab Donphan and put it up, or Great Tusk, and go ahead and put it up in here in S tier. This Pokemon, Ground plus Fighting, man, is just absolutely amazing. Like an incredible stab combination, especially in access to Knock Off and Rapid Spin. It can also Stealth Rock up. Like, it can do a ton of things very well. Booster energy sets are very good, I think, in my opinion. Bulk up variants I think are really cool. I think it was a speed tour I uploaded to the channel. I ran like a bulk up weakness policy rapid spin set and almost won with it. It can either headlong rush in close combat or earthquake and body press, depending on how you're feeling. It gets access to great coverage moves, either in like Ice Spinner and Mega Horn and Play Rough. It can also, like I said, Stealth Rock up. It can Rock Slide, so Edgequake coverage. It's a very, it can even taunt and things like that. I think Assault Vest variants are going to be very solid as well. Like, this is a great Pokemon, and it fits on so many teams, and it facilitates so many of the new Dark and Ghost type Pokemon very well. So, definitely very good here. Next up, we have Brute Bonnet. Big old Brute Bonnet. Or as the kids call it, Oonga Boongus is what me and Emil have been calling it. Very strong with 127 base attack. Does it get access to knockoff? I feel like you should. You don't get knockoff, you buffoon. You would be so much better if you had knockoff. Now, it can Spore still. It can Sucker Punch as well. Stab Sucker Punch is pretty strong. No Swords Dance is a bit unfortunate. Stomping Tantrum for ground coverage, which is nice. And, like, this thing took being stronger than Talonflame to a whole new level. It also can close combat, which is cool. I think Grass Dark, with its coverage, is very strong offensively, right? I think the issue with this guy, and it's very bulky, the issue with this guy is its speed tier, and it's very subpar defensive typing. And being 4 times weak to U-turn in a draft setting isn't as bad for something like Zarude, because Zarude's very fast and can U-turn out itself, whereas this guy's kind of a sitting duck and a little bit exploitable in my opinion. I still think it's very strong offensively and has some good defensive niches, but I'm going to go ahead and put him in, I think I am going to go ahead and put him in C tier, yeah. I think I'd be kind of out of my mind to do anything otherwise. Next up, we do have access to. We have Sandy Shocks here, an electric ground typing, which is a pretty solid defensive typing. It's very fast with 101 speed, 121 special attack, it's nothing to scoff at. It does get access to Spike and Stealth Rock. It can both switch around. It is kind of stuffed by opposing grounds, but Earth Power isn't gonna tickle on a lot of those grounds, honestly. Power Gem's an option. Its coverage is pretty darn lacking, unfortunately, but again, like I said, it is a very strong Pokemon. Tri-Attack might even be a solid neutral coverage move for a lot of these Pokemon. And definitely not bad as like a, Spike Center. Rock Hitter. Even like if those grounds come in for free on you, you can spike up a couple times on their switch-ins, and then when they come in on multiple hazards, they might get to a KO by that Earth Power with that 121 special attack. So I think it's definitely worth drafting at the very least. I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. Probably up here. Yeah, I think that's fair. Next up, we have Screamtail, which is a very bulky Pokemon, and a very annoying Pokemon at that as well. I think Screamtail is very obnoxious. The Amel Pokemon of the generation already. 115.99, 115 bulk with 111 speed. An incredible stat combination right there. It does a base 65 most of its attack stats, so it is a bit passive, but it has access to so many great moves, whether that be Wish with a great HP stat, or Dual Screens, or Perish Song, or Baton Pass, or Trick, or Thunder Wave, or a bunch of really, really cool things. Encore is incredible on a Pokemon this fast. It can also bulk up or Calm Mind, which is very solid and is a way to mitigate its mediocre attacking stats with great coverage overall. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and put this guy in B tier again as a very good Wish Passer and a very good fairy type in a meta that doesn't have a lot of fairies. I think I'm actually going to go ahead and put it here second in B tier. I'm pretty big on Screamtail. I think it's definitely super slapped on. Next up, we have a Pokemon that might be banned depending what your league is, and that would be completely understandable in Fluttermane. We knew this Pokemon was going to be broken the moment we laid eyes on it. Cool Miss Magius is going to be an absolute demon for so many teams to deal with. Ghost plus Fairy is basically an unresisted type combination, especially when you factor in Mystical coverage, Mystical Fire coverage, but it also can Thunderbolt. It can go ahead and throw off Energy Balls and Dark Pulses and Power Gems, but really you're going to have Moonblast, Shadow Ball, and Mystical Fire, and you're going to prosper. You can Calm Mind with like Booster Energy for your speed, which is definitely very solid. You can boost your energy for your special attack. You can be Scarf and Specs. Also get Size Shock. This thing does a lot of things, and most of it is just being very strong, but it is very strong and very good at being very strong. So I'm definitely a big Fluttermane guy. Next up is a Pokemon I think is kind of getting slept on in the Draft League format right now, and Big Slitherwing. I'm going to go ahead and put Slitherwing up here in A tier. I think this Pokemon is pretty darn incredible. Not necessarily S tier yet, but still A tier. Very good defensive typing and offensive typing. It can First Impression, it can Bulk Up, it can Close Combat, it can Leech Life, it has access to Morning Sun for reliable recovery, it can U-Turn, it can Will-O-Wisp, Wild Charge, Flare Blitz. Like, it has a bunch of really cool options. It can Flame Charge or Trailblaze for a speed boost option. Like, it can Body Press as well if you really need to, Earthquake. Like, it has a bunch of really cool options. Great move pool, great stat spread. It's very bulky. 135 attack is incredible. We've seen Bug Fighting do so well on Heracross and Buzzwole in the past, and I think Slitherwing is more of the same. Like, I think it's an incredible Pokemon for sure. Next up, we have my personal favorite Pokemon of the generation. This sprite does not do it justice in Big Roaring Moon. I'm going to go ahead and put it in S tier right behind Fluttermane here. This Pokemon is so good, man. Whether it be with Dragon Dance variants, with like just Crunch plus like Earthquake or Iron Head and things like that. Whether you be Terra Flying or Terra Steel. I think Terra Steel is a little bit better in draft in my opinion. You can be Choice Band variants. You can be Fat or Roost variants. It gets access to Taunt. It gets Edgequake coverage overall, which is also very solid. It can be Booster Energy variants to either boost speed or its attack, which is again very solid. It's incredibly strong. It is a scale. It's like the Scale Shot specific mon in this generation. It's the only mon really to get Scale Shot as far as I know in the game. So it can D-Dance up and sweep, obviously, if I haven't mentioned that. It's a really good Pokemon, man. And Dark Dragon's really solid, especially with access to U-Turn and being able to bring in potent mons that punish the very subpar defensive fairies in this generation. So I think, especially right now in the current state of the metagame, that Roaring Moon is an absolute demon to deal with. Next up, we have Iron Treads. I'm going to go ahead and put Iron Treads here in A tier. I definitely think that this Pokemon is very solid. It is just faster Excadrill, which is never going to be a bad thing. It can spin, it can Volt Switch, which Excadrill definitely can't do. It can Earthquake, it does act like Iron Head and like Heavy Slam and things like that. It can knock off Megahorn. It gets most of the same coverage that Great Tusk does, minus the fighting coverage outside of Body Press. Body Press is great in it with that 120 defense, and the 106 speed is really what sets this thing over the top. Really solid. It can be solid offensively and defensively, but I think it's a little bit better defensively. And that ground steel typing is pretty darn incredible. Like, it's a very good typing for a reason. Okay, next up we have Iron Moth. The Iron Moth, which is also going to go up here in A tier, in my opinion. This Pokemon is incredibly strong. I'm going to put it at the top A tier. Incredibly strong. It doesn't have access to Quiver Dance, but it can Agility. I think Agility plus like Booster Energy sets are great. It can Fiery Dance and Sludge Wave and Dazzling Gleam and Energy Ball and Discharge. It can U-Turn if you want. It can Toxic Spikes. It can Psychic. It can Morning Sun for recovery. It can do a lot of very cool things. This Pokemon is incredibly strong offensively. It doesn't have the defensive utility something like Slitherwing does, but like offensively it more so makes up for it. It has 140 special attack and 110 speed as well, so like very good. Also a very good Terra Captain, whether that be like, I've seen like Terra Flying like on the ladder and things like that. I don't know what I would make it if I were to Terra it in draft, but I'm sure we'll see some pretty creative things. Next up is a Pokemon I think is incredibly slept on. I'm going to go, not Gimme Goal. Iron Hands is going to go up here in A tier as well. I want to draft this guy so bad. One of the best new Pokemon that has been introduced in a draft league sense, in my opinion. This thing is so strong, it's so bulky. Fighting Electric, there's a great typing. It has an Elemental Punches plus Volt Switch. It can be great with an Assault Vest. Like with its astronomical base 154 HP stat, you can really make up for that bad def of 68. And giving it an Assault Vest. It has a great physical defense in 108. Very strong in 140 physical attack. It can Swords Dance or Bulk Up depending on how you're feeling. Typically, I feel like you're going to see Swords... Oh, no, it doesn't get Bulk Up. It only gets Swords Dance, but Swords Dance is great. And it has great coverage overall. It can Volt Switch as well. Very, very solid, like AV Sponge or like Resist Berry plus Swords Dance or Boost for Energy plus Swords Dance or whatever it may be. I think it's going to be very, very good. Very, very good. Then we have Iron Jugulis, who is unfortunately my least favorite design when it comes to the future mons, just because it's Robot Hydreigon, and that's it. But it's still definitely a solid Pokemon. I think people are giving this Pokemon a little bit too much shit competitively. 108 speed is very solid. 122 special attack, as well as like a Dark Flying typing, which is shown to be great. Dark Pulse plus Flamethrower plus like Hurricane and U-Turn, things like that. It does get access to Knockoff, which is great utility. It can Hydro Pump too for some reason. It definitely gets some really cool coverage options. It keeps Dragon Pulse at least. Not necessarily Draco, but Dragon Pulse. I wish it got Roost. I think if it got Roost, it would be low-key an S tier Pokemon. We're going to go ahead and put it at pretty high here in B tier. I'm going to go ahead and put it a little bit behind Screamtail. I think it's very solid offensively, despite the shit that it's getting. So, yeah. Next up, we have Iron Thorns, who has a terrible defensive typing. Rock plus Electric is really bad, but this Pokemon is very strong. It has good bulk, and it's pretty fast in 72, considering it's like a T-Tar variant. I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier here. I think it's much better if you make it one of your Terra Captains. I think like Terra Flying is very solid on this thing. It does have access to Dragon Dance. It can Stealth Rock. Can it Spike? It can Spike as well. So it has some cool things, but like that crippling fear of the move Earthquake is always going to be tough in a draft league setting. Like it is always going to be tough. Next up is Iron Jugulis. Iron Jugulis. I literally just did Iron Jugulis. Iron Bundle, who was recently banned to the Uber tier. Now, again, it's another case of a Pokemon that's much better in Smogon than it is going to be in a draft league setting. I do think it is still A tier worthy, but maybe even the top of A tier. But it's definitely not anything broken to, ban to the Nether Realm or wherever you want to send it to. Freeze Dry, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump. That's all you really need. I guess really all you need. You either get U-Turn or Flip Turn. You can also Encore, you can Taunt. It's very fast, it's very strong, very bulky physically too. Drops to any special move ever, but very, very strong Pokemon. Very predictable, but it's good at what it does. You can't complain about that. Then we have Iron Valiant, who's probably going to come here to second place. Fairy plus Fighting is just an incredible offensive typing. You can go physical or special. You have astronomical coverage. I don't even want to read it out because there's so many moves that this thing does freaking get. You can go ahead and Calm Mind, or you can Swords Dance. You can Taunt. You can do a bunch of really, really cool things. This Pokemon is incredibly, incredibly strong, incredibly potent, and there's a ton of fun things you can do with it. 130 attack, 120 special attack, 116 speed. Jesus Christ. Very good. Very, very good. Speaking of very, very good, we have Ting Lu up next, which is going to be Vessel of Ruin as its ability, which makes a special attack stat decrease by 25%, on top of it having 155 base HP and 125 base defense and 110 attack with a Dark Ground typing. It can Stealth Rock and Spike. It doesn't get Knockoff, or it would be an S tier Pokemon, but it does get access to Throat Chop and Earthquake. It can also Ruination very well, which is basically Dark type Nature's Madness, and just be an absolute nuisance to so many teams. So ridiculously bulky. If you have a way of keeping this guy healthy, he's going to be a problem. And I definitely think that he is worth an A tier pick in my opinion. Like, he might be, I'm going to put him at the top A tier. I haven't used him yet, so I might be overhyping him, but man, I think this thing is good. Man, do I think that thing is good. As like a great round 2 facilitator of your offense, just to be a big, big nuisance. Next up, we have Chen Pao, who I'm actually going to put here in S tier. Again, this is a little bit more of an offensive variant. Its ability decreases the defense of all Pokemon on the field by 25% other than itself. allowing it to be super mega Weavile, and just crunch and Icicle Crash this Ice Spinner through everything. It can Ice Shard, Sucker Punch, it can Swords Dance, it can Taunt. It's going to be incredible. Sacred Sword is a great coverage option that it has. It's so damn cool looking, and it's so damn strong. I really want to try Qian man. I think it would be one of my favorite Pokemon to use ever if I got my hands on it for a full season. Wo-Chien is next. I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. It is a pretty solid defensive Pokemon. It does have that Grass Dark typing, which is pretty darn mediocre and bad, but it is very bulky. It is basically a 25% drop on the attack stat of all Pokemon, which is going to be very solid. It does have access to knockoff, like the other two that we mentioned already, which is very valuable in its own right. I think Ruination is great. It can Leech Seed. It doesn't get access to Synth, unfortunately, but it can Taunt, it can Foul Play, it can even Leaf Storm if you need it to. It's a little bit underwhelming compared to the others, but it has a great Spadef stat as well as 135, so very good Pokemon for sure. I'm definitely a big fan. Then, man, I'm getting tired. What are we at? How long have we been recording? An hour and 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to speed through Chi-Yu, absolute demon offensively. We're going to go ahead and put him in A tier. Honestly, above both of these guys. He drops the Spadef stat by 25%. He's ridiculously strong. He can Nasty Plot. Very strong. Good Pokemon. Skipping the legends because they're going to be banned. Tinkaton, I am so disappointed in you. I'm putting you in D tier. Yep, I'm going to do it. You have an amazing typing, Stealth Rock, which is cool. You can Swords Dance. You could probably be decently solid with Terra. There's a low tier Terra option. But man, your stats are so bad. I can't believe your stats are this bad. 75 attack with that big hammer. You're telling me that you threaten Corviknights? You're a liar. You're a liar and a fraud. And it makes me upset that you're not as good as you should be. Armarouge. Armarouge is a Pokemon that's pretty darn cool. I'm going to go ahead and put him up in C tier. Psychic and Fire is very solid typing. I think like Weak Armor and Endure sets, plus like Weakness Policy could be very annoying for a lot of teams to deal with. You can be pretty darn strong. It's pretty strong under Psychic Terrain too if you do decide to draft like an Indeedee or something like that. Decent Pokemon. Then we have probably the better of the two in Ceruledge. I'm going to also put Ceruledge in C tier. Probably just right next to it. I do think Ceruledge is a little bit better. Swords Dance, and it's a little bit faster, and it also has Weak Armor, so you can do the same kinds of things. It has Shadow Sneak and Close Combat, and it's great dual stab combination. It costs Will-O-Wisp and Taunt and things like that. Bitter Blade's a pretty cool signature move as well, and yeah, good Pokemon. Toad's cool. You can Spore. That's cool. That's about it. I don't like your ability. It's annoying. I think it basically makes it to where status moves always go last, unfortunately, but they do ignore abilities, so you could Spore a Goldango, which is cool, but I don't like moving last. You also get access to Rapid Spin, which is pretty darn cool. I wish you had access to like Synthesis or something like that to keep yourself healthy. Strength Sap would make so much sense on you, but you don't get it. It can also Spike, which is awesome. But yeah, and it can knock off too, so like it's decently value. I think it's like definitely worth like a C tier pick. I'm gonna go ahead and put it back here. Yeah, I'm also gonna move down Rabasco. You're like right here. Yeah, right here. Yeah, perfect. Okay, King Gambit. You're gonna be in B tier, just on the inherent value of being a steel type. Yeah, we're gonna put you right here in front of Garganackle. You have a crippling fighting weakness, and you're very slow, but you're very strong. You can Stealth Rock up. You can Swords Dance up. You have two great abilities in Supreme Overlord as well as Defiant, and that's value on its own self because you are a steel type in this format. Clodsire, you're a demon, brother. You get all the hazards in the world. I'm gonna put you right here. You get Unaware, you get Water Absorb, and you're just very bulky and very, very annoying. Better Quagsire, amazing Pokemon. Absolutely love his design too. That's my little blueberry. Love him to death. Then we also have Annihilate. Annihilate's gonna go up here in A tier. Man, is this thing awesome? Right here. Right here. This thing is awesome. Rage Fist is a really annoying move, and it really makes playing around this thing a nuisance. Bulk up sets are great. I think Scarf and Band sets are great. Final Gambit with 110 HP is incredible. You can also Stealth Rock for some reason. You got great coverage. Ghost and Fighting is an unresisted stab combination. You do it well, brother. Bam! We have finished. Finally. This is going to be our list of all of the Generation 9 Pokemon in a Draft League setting. Let me know if you guys agree in the comments below. Again, comment question of the day. Let me know what you're most excited to use this generation. That being said, I will see you guys next time. Later.